So to the example is FlowerData. This example contains several branches. Our first branch will be explained before break, and 2 more branches after break. And probably we'll have even time left. So since branches are related to each other, I don't need to re-explain everything from scratch. I need to just explain changes. So let's clone FlowerData. Some branches of the code do not require server, but those branches that require server are essential because your assignment 4 will be requiring using server. I will provide server. So let's clone it. Code copy IntelliJ, get from version control, and paste. FlowerData Angular. Clone. How did I create this project? The project is created exactly the same way as assignment 3 project. Creation of assignment 3 project is video recorded in the beginning of discussion of assignment 3. So exactly the same, and please do the same. Okay. When we clone, we need to click npm install. When you create assignments 4 and final exam, I highly encourage you to do exactly the same. So a new project, Angular CLI, and remove this checkbox. Okay. Also, you can do -s. It is do not generate the files for automatic testing. I didn't ask you to do automatic testing so far. I didn't explain it. I need to devote half of the lesson to this topic. It's not long to explain, but we didn't do it. So probably I will just take a dice roll example and create tests for it, and this will be example of automatic testing. So if you do -s, it means do not create files for automatic testing. If you do it this way, create files for automatic testing. This is the difference. But this is important. If you make a check mark, a structure of the starting code will be different. So in order to have the same code structure as my example so far, you need to remove this one. Since eventually we will need to know how to create projects with standalone, I will provide one example and explain what is the difference. Honestly, differences are small, but it's enough of differences to get confused. So for now, let's stick to removing these checkbox. So this is how I created the project. There are several branches. There are branch main in simplest that almost the same. So let's, for sake of explaining the code, let's say just main doesn't exist. So simplest is the same as main. Observables, it is intermediate between simplest and using server. Then it goes using server, and some demo, please pop up message like loading message. Some of the theory is already explained when I was covering dice roll example. This example has more data. Just idea is quite close, but let's see. So let's start with branch called simplest. I check out this branch. So the goal of this branch is to explain navigation with data in the address line. Simplest branch is not getting data from the server, any data from the server. Everything is hard-coded. So let's run it and see what it does to explain the idea. We already had several examples with navigation. When we have navigation means we change pages, I using JavaScript. So Angular is imitating changing pages with JavaScript. And it's doing this very smart way. It is updating address line, and it's reading address line by JavaScript backwards. So pages generated by Angular JavaScript are bookmarkable. So we can create a bookmark to roses, and it will be indeed to roses, not to the last flower we saw. So let's, since I started, let's click this. This was a list of index. It is similar to example written in jQuery. except it is done in TypeScript and it is done in Angular. What is the difference between this example and example in jQuery? We use, first of all, we use the Angular, and when we navigate, address contains data. So when we bookmark it, this data from address line will be used by JavaScript to retrieve data matching this page. So it is how 100% bookmarkable. So if we create a bookmark to the fadil, it will indeed lead to the fadil all the time, not just to last flower we use it. As the same as for carnation. This link to carnation will be indeed carnation. So this is definitely advantage. Also using navigation framework of Angular makes program easier to organize. And also it is a lot more flexible than separate HTML pages because we can have pages inside of pages. So we have 2 pages within APP component that takes entire screen. Also, each page can have pages inside of them. So we can have nested pages in Angular. I'm not covering nested pages for sake of simplicity. We have limited time. But just be aware of it. If you need it, look up. It's not difficult to learn this part. Angular, in my opinion, it is far more straightforward than any other framework for JavaScript, but it is, I would say it is opinionated opinion. Maybe somebody else will say React is similar, not simpler. React would be simpler for short projects. For large projects, in my opinion, Angular is simpler because it already has everything inside. But React is a nice choice. If you have time, learn it. Knowing both will increase your chances to get a job for sure. So this is the behavior of the program. So let's look up navigation. We've already noticed that some data is on an address line. We have two pages in a list and details. So let's see. Navigation is defined if we have a project without standalone components. Navigation is defined in APP routing module. So when project is created, this is empty. So we need to fill it up in order to see at least one page. Unless if we don't fill it up and we need, it will probably show only APP component without. Currently, APP component HTML contains header, router outlet, and footer. Okay. Router outlet, it is placeholder for inserting pages. If page has own pages inside, it will be another router outlet inside of it. It's a marker to insert page. It's not replaced by pages. Pages are just inserted below it. So if we look up views document tree, we will find router outlet, although it is showing the page, because page is inserted below this router outlet. Okay, so routing module defines what is shown. So I define its default address. It means nothing after slash, and it goes to flower index component. And I also define it address flower slash and ID. ID is replaceable item. Starting with column, it means replaceable. It will navigate to flower details component if it is anything like flower slash something. Star star means everything, since it is matched top to the bottom. In this case, star star means none of the above, means anything except above, right? So, and it will redirect to index page. So if we go to blah, 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 supposed to go to index page. So redirecting to index page. So let's see how it is done. I already mentioned that this version of the code does not get data from web, it is hard-coded. So what did I do? Since my final goal is to pick data from the server, I run its server, and I copy-paste the output from the server. So I run the server using Postman or just browser, it doesn't matter. And whatever was output, I copied and I pasted it. Where did I paste it? I created a file, and just name of the file is not important. I called it catalog data. I created variable, local variable. Initially, this was not defined, so it was just variable without type. And I assigned it some part of the output of the server. It's not entire piece, it is just some of it. But it is actual data that I'm going to display. So there is extra wrapper that I added later in the code to match data coming from the server in this data. So, but now it is, I want to display data in similar format, so it is, I'm working on displaying data in navigation part of the program. So I picked data from the server in a browser, I type it address in the browser, and I copy-pasted this piece here. If data comes in some not nice format, you don't need to format it manually, you can always do it like code reformat file. And if you copy-paste data in one long wrapped line, it will fix this issue by reformat file. Now, since this is TypeScript, I need to define types. Defining types will help IDE to find my mistakes. Right? So how do I define types? So I look at the structure of the data, and I started to define it. Data doesn't have type names, so I can make up own names, type names, what I like. Okay. So I see here it's obviously it's an object, right? So let's call it somehow picture, right? Picture JSON. Another common name for this kind of types could be picture DTO. DTO stands for data transfer object. So data came, it was transferred, so the DTO data transfer object makes sense. JSON also makes sense because it's part of the JSON that is received. So I defined these types in one file. Also, I could create files per every type, but it will create a lot of files. So I created a file called JSON structure, just empty file, and I defined it types there. So I will move it to the bottom so I can compare. So for this picture type, I go from the depths outside, from the deepest level to outside. So I define this as interface, and I call this interface picture.json. As you see, I have a field called small, which type a string, field called large, type as a string. If data contains something else that your program doesn't use, fine, but you don't need to list it. This is the meaning of interface. Interface is listing required parts, and if something else in addition to required, interface is still satisfied. Right? So for this reason, if data contains fields that you don't use, you don't need to mention them in interface. Right? Because this will means that something else and we don't care about it. We just need these fields and make sure it is there. Okay. And next, I see next level outside of it is this object, right? It's kind of flower. So I call it FlowerJSON. Interface FlowerJSON. You see, have ID, which is string, label, string, price, number, description, string, picture, picture.json, because it's another object. A wiki location is a string. Okay. So if this would be picture object, and you see, now we have array of those picture objects, right? Array of those picture objects. Oops, I messed it up. Edit, undo, paste. Array of those objects inside of some other object, right? So now at the top level, I define it catalog JSON with field flowers, which is array of FlowerJSON object. flower JSON object that contains picture JSON objects, right? So I describe the data, and now I can define that this type is catalog JSON. Now, data coming from the server is not necessarily the data that you want to display, because if you wrote the code for your server, probably you've provided the most convenient way of data to you, but it's not always that you have an option. If you already saw that sometimes servers can generate JSON by default based on tables, right? Or you use server written before you start to use it, or for general purpose like weather server. You don't have an option to control how it serves the data. So maybe you want to do data transformation. So this program is doing data transformation from the format that is received to format that is convenient in the program. In your assignment, you don't have to do it because this is demo for possible data transformation. If in your assignment you don't do it, so it's okay, it's your choice. Okay? But I'm showing data transformation in this program. So I define it class flower, and this will be internal format for my program. So I will convert flower JSON objects to flower objects, just for sake of showing data conversion. Now, I need to share data somehow, so I'm creating service. So I will also use service to retrieve data from web. So I created FlowerData service. This is class, so how did I create it? ng generate class flower. Right? I created FlowerData service, ng generate service, flower-data, enter. In FlowerData service, I declared array of flower objects. This will be shared data. And it is private because I want to imitate data, eventually data coming from it, so I will need some getter methods to retrieve data. So it is already a little bit imitation. Next, since I need to do conversion from coming object, data transfer object to internal convenience object to flower object, so I need some function to do it. So I created static function that takes flower JSON object and returning flower object. So how to do it? Brute force. I call it flower constructor, and now I'm copying data from flower JSON object to flower object. When I reach it, addresses of images, remember that flower also had flower JSON, but flower JSON also had picture JSON. My flower object is flat, so I don't have object inside of an object because it's extra inconvenience. Also, this object contains not a file name, but address of the file, including name. It's also more convenient when you display it, because when you display image, you need file name plus location. So in this case, it is file name plus location, not just file name. So in FlowerData service, I have address. This is location of the flower images. So when I convert data to image source, I join this address with image name. So now I have address of small image, address of larger image. And now I'm returning flower object. Next, my variable, which is, say, global, so I can use it. I can import it, so it is imported at the top. Catalog variable, with this catalog variable from catalog data file. So is this imported here? So I want to create this array where it is not initialized immediately, so it has to be initialized in constructor. So I decided to initialize it in constructor. Catalog flowers. Catalog is a global variable, not global, imported here. And it will be array of flower JSON objects. So I'm building array of flower objects. So I do transformation. So I use map method of array that takes lambda function that will be applied to elements of one array to create elements of another array, the resulting array. So I use my flower function, adjacent to flower function, to define the lambda function. It takes flower JSON, and I apply this to create flower object. So this lambda function will be applied to create array of the proper type, and it is assigned to flowers. So after constructor is done, this will be array of flowers. Next, I define it get flower list, which will be these flowers, and I define it get flower by ID. Find by ID is a little tricky because I need to somehow go through array and find it by ID, right? So I'm using function find, which is method of the array, that takes lambda function returning true or false. When it is returning true, it means found. So first time when this function is returning true, it will be the object which is found. If it never returns true, it is possible if I give name of the flower that is not in the list, it will never find anything, right? It will return undefined. So this is the reason why this function is returning either flower or undefined. If I provide ID which doesn't exist in the list of flowers, it will return undefined. All right? Questions? So it's an imitation of a data. But what is missing? Delay is missing. And handling delay is missing. And this is not a bug, it's a feature because I want to avoid complexity at this moment. I'm explaining other things. So why delay is missing? And because data is assigned to a variable, it will come at the same time as JavaScript, right? It's a part of JavaScript, so it will be available immediately. It's a variable, right? Variable value. If we store data in a file, even on the same server, we'll have to send request, give me that content of the file. And when we send request, give me that content of the file, it will introduce delay. Potentially, it may take a while, so we don't want to freeze our program while it's waiting for the data. So we need to handle it a smart way. So I'm avoiding that complexity at this moment because data is already here and it's assigned to a variable. So let's see what is next. We have index page and details page. We already saw that index page has address like nothing, it's 4200/. So and it is shown first, right? Why it is shown first? Because, app routing, because it is default address 4200. This is going, why it is shown first. So let's go to index page first. Index page. Since it needs to pick data, I'm injecting service. Service is providing the data. Please notice I don't have keyword public or private because using that keyword will create a local variable, this dot data, flower data service. I don't need that variable because I'm using this service only once inside of the constructor. So I'm calling get flower list and I will assign it to list of flowers here. I don't need service after that. So I'm not creating this dot variable for it, instance variable for service. So now it is list of flowers and I can display it inside of template because this is public variable. I'm going to my template and now I have table. So I decided to organize this table. I have 2 columns. In the first column, this is TD, it is table data. Table row is repeated for each flower of the array of flowers. Okay. I have a link around image, right? And this link is easiest to implement with router link because it's static. Right. I decided to use like recommended way to join addresses is to use array. Please notice when you provide array in quotations, you have to use square brackets here. Because otherwise this will be taken as JavaScript, this will be taken as string and never calculated. In this case, we really need to use it as an array, as code. So just because it's a code, we need to calculate it, right? Evaluate it as a code. So this is the reason why we have square brackets around it. So how it will deal with array, it will join these items with slash in between. So the result will be flower slash some ID like a rose. This will be around image. This will be source of this small image, and alt it is, I use label to assign alt. It will, in the second column, it will insert label, and this is how to format currency. In your assignment, when you need to display tip calculation, you can, or total calculation, tip calculator, right, in your assignment. You can use pipe currency to print it nicely. Otherwise, you will have some fractional cents that don't look pretty. So please consider doing this in your assignment, so this will make it nicer output. So you will not have fractional cents in calculation. And it will automatically add $sign to it. So this part is useful in your assignment 3. How to format currency. Okay. Questions? So this pipe is used to format currency. Next. When I click on this router link, it will take me to details page. So let's see details page. In the details page, I need to display flower data, so I need to have access to FlowerData service. And I also need to pick data from the address line from here. So I need to have access to address line. So for the sake of access to address line, I'm injecting activated route objects that contain data of the address line. Next, in the constructor, I'm picking ID from the address line. If we do activated route.param_map, it will give us observable. What is observable? It's a container with potentially different content, so we can set up observer on it. Potentially, it can be useful if for some reason address is changing, but I don't know why. In this case, it wouldn't change, because address is the result of navigation. When you come there, it's already given. So there is a way to deal with even changing data, but in this case, it's not changing, so I'm using shortcut. Snapshot means current content. So in this case, it is content of the address line will not change after you navigate. And if you change it manually, it will call navigation again, but again, to the address that you type it, so it will not change after you navigate. So snapshot is adequate in both scenarios, even if you type address after navigation and press enter, because after navigate it won't change. So snapshot param_map. Potentially address can contain more than one item, so this is why it is map, key value storage. So I retrieve data using key. Potentially API can return null if this key is not in the address line, if there is no data that is matching this key. In this case, it won't happen unless you somehow miss it, whatever. So now you go to, you retrieve it, and here it is. This will be ID. And if ID is not null, you can retrieve the data from this source. So I'm calling FlowerData service, get flower by ID, and it is assigned here. What if it is undefined? It potentially can be undefined if I type. Remember that that function is returning undefined. So my program is not crashing. I have else in it and end message. So if else, if it is not undefined, it is displaying flower, else it is displaying error message. So let's see how it is done inside of the template. So inside of flower details component HTML, I have a template. If is handling the case when it is undefined, because flower.label will crash the program if flower is undefined. We cannot call field of undefined. Undefined.label will cause a crash. And even worse, if you put it outside of if, it will not even compile, it will show error. So now, ng container, we already encountered it, it is for sake of logic. It doesn't add anything to document, anything meaningful to document 3. So if flower is not undefined, I'm displaying stuff about flower. Right, for the aster. So what do we see? If flower is not undefined, I'm displaying word flower, then label, flower.label. Then I'm inserting image, but I'm using image large source. And it's not a link, it's just a frame. And class, this class is creating this shadow. And we have a div box for this message, which is loud the description. Else. So this example show if with else. I don't have to use if else, and we can do more straightforward tricks. This is example of if in if templates with else. So how to do if with else? You define some block, template block, and you use our template variable to refer to that block with else. So this if will display content if condition is true, or display this piece when condition is false. Now you probably remember that we had templates, if templates in Spring Boot, right? That didn't have else. This feature didn't exist. But Angular template do have else. And I have router link back to flower catalog. Please notice that now I don't have square brackets because I don't need to calculate the address. It's already a string, and this is slash, and this is where we need to go to root address 4200 slash. Okay. So this is the reason why there is no square brackets. We don't need to calculate. This is already a result. Questions? Please notice that this program data contains links to Wikipedia page, right? Address in Wikipedia page, and it is not shown here, right? As exercise, add this link. Not difficult, right? Fine. You need to edit several places in the code to add link to Wikipedia page. Okay. Questions? So it's an exercise. Edit the code so it will show a link to Wikipedia page here. It's exercise for today. Okay. It's probably 15 minutes. It's no big deal to change. And next.